often say good to be seen by you again, right? And of course, we get to interact with each other in the chat, but it's been a few weeks and I have missed you guys. I thought about doing a video several times, but it just wasn't something that I thought would be the best I could do at the time because I have so much happening. So I thought, well, let me take a few weeks off, just get everything kind of really well established and the way I want it to be. And then I'll come back in. Let's take it nice and easy. Let's do a text reading, right? We haven't done text readings in a long time. They're my favorite, right? The pre-Christian evidence that Jesus is a biblical Messiah is my favorite series, right? I think it's probably the most important series, although you could argue a few others having to do with Jah, divine name, but the Messiah, right, salvation, all the stuff, everything from Jah. That to me is very significant in terms of the work we do, right? Remember, we're called to bear witness to God and to the Christ. That's our primary objective, in addition to treating others the way we want to be treated. So, I have that series and a few others, but in terms of like what we're about, right? What we're really here to do. And what I try to do in all my videos, but in the text readings, that's all we do. Read the text, right? We get into it, we think about it, and we make sense of it, we apply it. And every time I think that we've done it since I started doing these, it's been informative and enjoyable on some level. We've been able to get something out of it. Good to see Pink Moon and Betsy. Excuse me. And I started doing these video day texts in association with what I was doing at the time, tweeting day texts on Twitter, tweeting my translations at the time. And then I moved into doing these videos. But I moved into doing day text videos. If you go back, I think it's like November 2018, November 19th, something like that. We were in the New Testament letters. We hadn't done like the 4 great messages, 4 gospels, or the book of Acts. So we have a ton. Good to see you, Feliciano. We have a ton of text reading material. Remember, these used to be day texts. We changed them to text readings when we completed our readings in the New Testament, right? From the latter portion of the New Testament through Revelation. And we were able to pretty much break up that material into pieces that we could categorize and call day texts, basically, right? And so, small little sections that we could get a lot out of. But then when we got into Genesis, and I think even starting with part of Revelation, when we were reading Jesus talking to the congregations, right? We read kind of a larger section of material because it all related to the same subject in a way that it was just best to take it all in together. Good to see you, David, and Sandy as well. And then we got into Genesis, right? And I love to go back and watch my Genesis text readings because, not to watch myself, I actually don't. It's hard to watch yourself, at least for me. But the information, I like to remind myself of what I researched at the time to put together with that text reading video, because I think Genesis often gets attacked unfairly, and I'm hoping that our text readings in Genesis really help take back some credibility for what's written in those accounts. And so text reading just seemed better, right? Because now that includes like proverb-sized texts or accounts, right? Like in Genesis. So that's the whole history of day text, from Twitter to videos as day text, and then into text readings near Revelation and Genesis. So the text readings, I stopped doing these a few months ago, probably, over a half a year ago. We did a First Kings and a Second Kings, because these text readings and the day text preceding them, they're based on what I've translated to date. right? So we don't use the NWT or any other translation. Well, sometimes we might bring it in. But the text readings and day text videos I do are based on what I've done to date. And as you know, I've recently finished Proverbs, Hebrew and Greek, and a few other texts from different sources in terms of the historicity of the text that you can read when you get the copy in the notes and text material. But if you have access to the CWJ discussion forum, you can go into the translation section. You can see all done Proverbs. So a couple months, you guys, I've been working, right? These last few weeks just haven't gone for nothing. But I wanted to reset. I've got a lot to talk about. I got a ton of stuff that I think you will all enjoy. I hope you'll enjoy. I'll do my best. And I enjoy being here with you. So thank you for your time. But the text readings, right? So we kind of got off because I started doing Bible and the Trinity and conflict. We'll get back to that too. And of course, like I said, the pre-Christian evidence, Jesus is the biblical Messiah videos. So it's just, I hadn't, I was working so hard on translating Proverbs. For some reason, it just kept me from doing text readings in Job and then in Psalms. After we do Job today, everything we do today from 3 chapters of Job, that's all I've done so far. And it's several, verses, and it's a readable amount, but not a lot. I just haven't had the time to sit down and go through it the way I need to get more material in there that I'm comfortable with. I've done a little bit more in the book of Psalms, but it's such a big book, comparatively, I haven't done a lot, but I have done, actually, we'll be able to do several videos of text readings in the Psalms, which we'll do right after this one, over the next few weeks. I'm going to start integrating the text readings again, and I may do them here and there, right? Won't always be weekend, but I want to get into Proverbs. First we'll do Psalms, then we'll get into Proverbs, because that's really, I have a wealth of knowledge and information and a new translation that I want to share with you all and go into in detail with all of you and talk about it. So we've got a lot coming up. All the videos that we've got series going on, text readings, right? And who knows what else. I've got a lot of options. Still very busy. I have a lot going on. But this is really what I'm about. And I know it's what you're about. So the translation of Proverbs, couple months, it'll be done. I think you'll like it. I feel really good about it. So it's a start. It's a good start. And I've actually already started in other ways, but this will be a big start, I think, because of the volume of material, the amount of time and detail I put into the text and the translation and the notes, and just getting all the verses in alignment or where they're not in alignment, making it possible for you to see where they should go. All the additional material, right, that in some cases is in the Hebrew or the Greek and not the other. And it's not like a bunch of that, but it's some of it, and you get to see it and you can judge it for yourself. So all that is coming. Let's get to the text reading, though. I didn't want to make this too long of a video, but I haven't seen you in such a long time. I wanted to give a little intro, right, and let you know what's going on. And let's get to the text reading, though. Talk about Job. And then, we'll have some thoughts. We'll share some time together. It's a holiday, of course, the Easter holiday. And we, as Christian witnesses of Jah, we don't judge you no matter what you choose to do, right? We're about 3 things. Praising and promoting the worship of the God Jah, the one God of the Bible, the Father. Accepting and believing in his Son, the Messiah, the sent forth one, Jesus of Nazareth, as a man. Pre-human spirit, Son of God, the firstborn of all creation, raised to life as a life-giving spirit, also raised up his own body out of the tomb after the 3rd day and appeared in it and other bodies to his disciples before he returned to the right hand of the Father, and did not take his flesh and blood and bone with him, because spirits don't have those, like he told those to whom he appeared when they were in the room together, and the description that we have of Jesus in Revelation 1, 12 through 16, consistent with the spirits described in Daniel chapter 10, tells us all we need to know, right? We don't have these traditions getting in our way of accepting the biblical text. We just embrace it, right? Like these text readings. We're going to get to it right now. Let's go. We've got to talk about this stuff. And then, of course, as you know, I mentioned briefly with Easter, different groups do things differently. We believe that all Christians should partake of the emblems. We believe that all Christians are going to be with the Christ, either in the new heavens or the new earth. And some people, when I say we, I mean, this isn't like something you have to believe to be a Christian witness of job. And in large part, what we believe is that, Christians are the brothers of Christ to whom people who are not Christians, the nations, the great crowd, treat well and are therefore rewarded and wash their robes and make them white in the blood of the Lamb, right? If they were already Christian, they wouldn't have to do that. They would have already washed their robes and had put their faith in and been born again and made alive in the Christ, right? So it's talking about the nations that Jesus explicitly describes and how they treat his brothers, those who do the will of his Father, Christians. But if you don't think you should partake of the emblems, that's okay. We're not here to pressure you, at least I'm not. Do what you believe is correct, and I will do that too. And I'll give you my reasons, like these texts. In this case, from the book of Job. Now, Job, we have a lot of good information for Job. Now, when it comes to the Dead Sea Scrolls, we've got several fragments of like 4 different books, 4 different manuscripts of Job that are dated pretty early, right? To like the 3rd and 2nd century BCE. But they're very fragmentary. There's not a lot of material. But it's not like nothing. It's about portions of about 10 chapters. And so we have representation almost 2,500 years ago, right? About 2,400 years ago, 2,300 years ago for the book of Job. And we have Job in the Masoretic text. We have Job in the Greek Septuagint tradition. We have Coptic versions of Job, Latin versions. We have famous discussions of Job, for example, in the writings of Origen, where he talks about parts of, like I was saying earlier about the translation with Proverbs and how my translation will show you differences in the Greek and Hebrew. Well, with the book of Job, there's something called the asterisk Job material. And it's actually, it could be one of several different markers that in different traditions set aside or separate parts of the book of Job from other parts of the book of Job. And Origen is famous for doing this as well. The reason is, it's not as bad as you might think. It is material that's kind of suspect, but the reason Origen and others marked off some parts of the book of Job, at least in the Greek tradition with Origen, is because it's not so much what Origen's kind of trying to do is really bring agreement among the Hebrew and Greek text. And where there's variances with the Greek and Hebrew text, at least in the case of the book of Job, and maybe elsewhere as well, in what is known as Origen's hexapla, what he would do is he would borrow from other versions. Like I mentioned, the Coptic version of Job is very similar in terms of the content with the type of book of Job you would have without the asterisk material, right? So it's maybe part of that same tradition of Job without the asterisk material, or material that's not in agreement with the Hebrew, but that again, is in agreement with versions like the Coptic version. So Origen's looking at this and thinking, okay, I can see we don't have full agreement with the Hebrew and the Greek, just like we have in other texts, right? Not like, I mean, it is a lot in some sense, but in another sense, it's not comparatively, right? So you have certain texts that are different. Deuteronomy 32:8, instead of the sons of Israel, says the sons of God. And so it makes a big difference in terms of the apportionment of the nations, which is in agreement with texts like Daniel that talk about the nations being overseen by princes, different demonic spirits, gods, like in Psalm 82. The very gods that God addresses because the way they're not properly ruling over their own people and the way it's affecting the nation of Israel. So, in any case, Origen is looking at this thinking, okay, I know sometimes the Hebrew and Greek don't agree, and that doesn't mean one or the other is correct or not. Think of it this way. So you might have a tradition of the Hebrew text that contains certain words that agree with the Greek text, and then you might have another Hebrew tradition that doesn't have that part of the material that agrees with the Greek text. Why would that be? Well, different communities had slightly different texts for the same reasons that sometimes we do. Right? We don't always have the space. We don't always have the money. We don't always. Well, maybe today it's a lot easier, right, to get paper and stuff. But back then it wasn't so simple. A little more complicated to get copies of material. So I think editing was a little bit more easy to do on some level based on the situation or circumstance. And sometimes they just had different traditions that were slightly different in how they worded things or how they expressed accounts from the past. And so, in many cases, though, you'll have the Greek Septuagint agree with the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are an earlier text than, say, the Masoretic tradition, right? In Origen, right, he's in like the 3rd century. Second, 3rd century, and he's not, necessarily with all the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? He's pretty much got a couple hundred years after the Dead Sea Scrolls type texts, and so it's going to be more like the Masoretic text on some level. It's not quite as, right, he's much earlier. Again, 2nd, 3rd century Origen, writing mostly in the 3rd century. So you have a text that is probably in many respects in transition between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Masoretic text. And Origen is trying to deal with some of these differences, right? The Messiah's come, so we may have some doctrinal differences as well. But basically what he does is he relies on the versions, in this case something like the Coptic, and he'll add it and he'll mark it as material that's questionable but that is in agreement with other versions. Basically, is how you could look at the quote-unquote asterisk material in the book of Job. So it's not material that's not likely to be true. It's just material that's separated because it doesn't have the full agreement with the Hebrew text that Origen is working with. It may have agreement with other texts Origen knows about, but if it doesn't agree with the Hebrew, he marked it off. And it's known as the asterisk material in Job. So, and again, we have Aramaic translations of the book of Job, Coptic, Latin, Masoretic text, Dead Sea Scroll fragments. So the book of Job is pretty well established over a long period of time, over multiple versions and traditions. So let's go to the material that I've translated to date. Job 1 through 7, and Job 34, 1 and 2. And now before I do that, let me just bring up one more thing here that I meant to bring up. It'll just take me a second. And that way I'll have it ready once we're all set. So 1 second, let me pull this up. We'll get to the text reading. Okay, so there's that. That's what I wanted. And there's that. Perfect. So we'll come to that in just 1 second. That's this material right here. I'll be going over with you. Very important material that you know about that. So we're good to go there. Let's get to our text reading. Job 1, 1 through 7, chapter 34, 1 through 2, and 37, 18. Greek and Hebrew, and I put them right next to each other. Whereas in my translation, you'll see them across the page from each other, or maybe on parallel columns. I haven't finalized that yet. That's coming. I'm going through the editing right now. Once it's fully edited, then I will put it in its final form, so I don't have to change anything anymore. But right now, I put them one after the other, right? So you got, there's two notes here, so it's a little different there. But right after that, it's H and G, Hebrew, Greek. So we'll compare translation of the Hebrew and the Greek. Chapter 1. Oh, hello, Dada. Can you guys see Dada? Little Dada. Oh, he took off. Okay. Chapter 1, verse 1, Hebrew. There was a man in the land of Uz. His name was Job. As for that man, he was physically or morally perfect and just, and he lived in fear of God so that he would turn away from what is evil. Now, we talked about this idea of being perfect or without blame in relation to Noah when we did our text reading, right? And we talked about how, it may be in a sense comparatively with others or in a less perfect sense than Adam that we're talking about here. But as I also discussed with Noah, it could just be that neither Job nor Noah, at the time that those statements are written about them, in Job's case, Job 1:1, and in Noah's case, that Jehovah found him to be a man blameless in his generation. Of course, again, I think that's comparative, but still, there could be a sense in which Noah just hadn't sinned. He hadn't sinned in the way he would. All right, at some point, everyone's going to sin. Everyone's going to fall short. Everyone will have to pay the price. And then we're judged based on what we chose to do in the sense of whether it's vile or good, like Jesus says in John 5, whether we're worthy of life or remain dead, second death. Right? Rise up in judgment, life or death. And it's the same penalty as you got when you sinned before. It's just a question of whether or not you're deserving of life from Jehovah's standpoint or Jesus' standpoint because of what you chose to do, what you embraced in spite of your sin, whether you're a sinful person or not, what you really enjoyed doing. So it wasn't really even necessarily always a sin. It's what you really wanted to do. Versus someone like Joseph who really didn't want to do something that was a sin and he was able to resist it. Right? So that's practicing what is good in spite of being sinful. We've talked about it. Did a text reading on it. Did a whole open session on it, I think, right? So it could be that Job just hadn't sinned in the sense in which God would consider him not, perfect in that sense. I don't know that. It's a possibility. Or again, we're dealing with a little bit less type of perfection. But that's what it means, physically or morally perfect and just. And even though it requires me to explain it a little bit like this and how that could be true, I think people can figure that out. And that's what it says, right? We have to stay within the limits, the semantic range of the terms involved, even if they present us with a complication, a slight one at times. And he lived in fear of God so that he would turn away from what is evil. Note on Hebrew 1:1, land of Uz. Uz is likely somewhere east of southern Israel, though its exact location is not yet known. Greek text, verse 1. There was a certain man in the dry country whose name was Job, and that man was truthful, without blame, righteous, and God-fearing, for he kept away from every evil occurrence. And you can see it comes out a little different, but it's basically saying the same thing, right? See, even though this sounds a little different, I don't consider this like an addition. Maybe you could argue a part of it is one word, but look at it. It says he was physically perfect and just and lived in fear of God. And here it says he was truthful, without blame, righteous, and God-fearing. Right? That's pretty close to the same thing as that. A little difference. And I don't always note little expressive differences. When I note a difference in italics or with a plus or a minus, it's when there's a clear addition or difference by subtraction or not having what's in the other text, not just a slightly more wordy description. But that doesn't always qualify. And I'll explain this in my introductory to all of the texts where I use that system. All right. Note on Greek 1:1, dry country. Dry is my understanding of the Greek word ausitidi, which, though unclear, appears to relate to the Greek word for drying, which is ausis. Verse 2, now there were born to him, that is Job, 7 sons and 3 daughters. Verse 2, Greek text, now there were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. Verse 3, and it came to be that his stock, Job's stock, of various animals amounted to 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 pairs of oxen, 500 female donkeys, as well as a great abundance of servants. Indeed, Job himself had become highly distinguished among all the sons of the East, or among all the sons of Adam since the beginning. A couple ways you could translate that here. So that's it's interesting when it comes to thinking of the history of Job and where exactly he may have been located. Either way, let's move on. So Job obviously had quite a bit of material possessions, and the Greek description is this. And it was also the case that his animals amounted to 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 pairs of oxen, 500 grazing female donkeys, as well as a number of regular servants. There were great works by him upon the earth, and in fact, Job had a special birth, eugenis, among those who live where the sun rises, those who live in the east. There were great works by him, by Job, and Job had a special birth, according to the Greek text, among those who live where the sun rises. So there's something unique, according to the Greek history of this account, Greek text, Greek tradition, with Job's birth. And it says in the Hebrew, right, he had become highly distinguished. So to do that, there would have to be a reason, wouldn't there? There'd have to be something he's doing. Excuse me. That would account for this high distinguishment. And the Greek kind of makes that more explicit, right? He did a lot of really great stuff. So someone very well known. There's a reason this book exists. Verse 4, and Job's sons would go around and make a feast in the house of each man when it was his turn or on his day, and they would send a messenger and call for their sisters to eat and to drink with them. Now, some people believe this is a reference to a birthday. I don't know. I can't tell. It does make day something unique to each of Job's sons. So Job's sons would go around and make a feast in the house of each man when it was his turn or on his day. So that could either be his birthday or just his day for making the feast in his house. There is no way to determine if this is a reference to a birthday. It could be. It could just be to a reference to the day that is that son's day for choosing to have a feast, or his day, not necessarily for choosing, it's just his day. It's a assigned day for hosting the feast. Verse 4, Greek text, let's see what it says. Now, as Job's sons would gather with each other, they would prepare drink appropriate for each day, and at the same time, they would bring along their 3 sisters to eat and to drink with them. Right? So, a little bit different in the Greek text. Basically the same, but it doesn't make it like his day, so that it could be interpreted potentially as a birthday. for each day. It's more general. It's not specific to each individual. Verse 5, Hebrew text. Now, when it came about that they would go around on days of family eating, then Job would send a representative, but he would set himself apart from them so he could rise early in the morning and offer up complete sacrifices on behalf of each of them, because as Job would say, perhaps my children have sinned when they were to have blessed God in their heart. When it came to such things, this is what Job would do on every one of these days. Look, he would get up early in the morning. He would offer sacrifices on behalf of his children, just in case they were doing something, right? That's how much he cared for them, how much he believed in Jehovah. Verse 5, Greek text. And when these days of drinking took place, Job would send a representative. Right, potentially also he's thinking, they go around, they have these kind of parties at each other's house. So maybe there's more likely that they're going to do something like this. In any case, the Greek text says on these days, Job would send a representative, but he would ritually cleanse his children as he rose in the early morning and offered sacrifices on their behalf for each one of them. Even a whole young bull is a sin offering out of concern for their souls. For, as Job would say, perhaps my sons in their thoughts dwell on evil things where it concerns God. Therefore, in this way, Job would act on every one of these days. So he would preempt their badness. He knows the kids, right? And he's looking out for them in the way that is, in the spiritual sense, the most important, right? And of course, as a father, you can only do so. You can't force your kids to do things right. You can only show them the light. You can only set a good example and teach them the truth. Everyone has to choose. But we can pray, right? We can always pray for anybody and let the God Jah decide. Verse 6. Now it came to be the time, or the day, when the sons of God came to stand in their place near Jehovah, or to present themselves to Jehovah, and Satan also came in among them. Verse 6, Greek text. Then it came to be that day when, indeed, the angels of God came to stand before the Lord Jehovah, and the one who slanders, or the devil, the one who falsely accuses others, came in with them. Verse 7, Hebrew text. Then Jehovah began to say to Satan, from where do you come? So Satan responded to Jehovah, and he began to say, from traveling in the earth and from walking in it. Greek text, verse 7, Then the Lord Jehovah said to the one who slanders, or to the devil, from where have you come? Then the one who slanders answered the Lord Jehovah and said, I am here after traveling around the earth and after walking below the sky, or under heaven. We'll come back to that account in a moment. Chapter 34. Jumping ahead, of course, we're doing the text I've translated to date. Verse 21, Elihu speaking to Job. For Jehovah's eyes look upon the ways of mankind, and he sees all of mankind's steps. Verse 21, Greek text. For he is a watcher of all the works of mankind, so nothing mankind does has escaped his notice. Verse 22, There is no darkness, and there is no shadowy place in which to hide for those who are practicing wickedness. Verse 22, Greek text. There will be no place to hide the lawless things, which are being done. Chapter 37, verse 18, Hebrew and Greek. Last text of our text reading. We'll go back and talk about a couple things. Can you, with him, stretch out an area for the clouds that is strong, like a metal mirror that is poured firm? Verse 18, will you, with him, strengthen ancient areas which are strong, like a mirror made from pouring metal? All right. So let's go back to talk about some of these things here. We talked a little bit about the uniqueness of Job's birth, right? Highly distinguished among all the sons of the East, or since the beginning. And in the Greek, having a special birth among all those who live where the sun rises. And how Job was especially caring and loving and spiritual in the way he looked after his children. They would go and visit each other, and he would pray for them on the days when they would do these things in case something bad might come into their heart. And then it speaks of a time, a day, or a time, right? Yom. It can be day or time, period of time. When the sons of God came to stand before Jehovah, including Satan. And Satan tells him that he was out traveling among the earth, under the sky heaven. So like on the earth, like the same way when he was on the earth in the Garden of Eden. Or with Jesus in Luke 4. He's able to physically manifest and move around on the earth. And of course, depending on where we are now with regard to Revelation 12, he may be down here in a whole new way. Either way, we got to watch out, right? So, nonetheless, these sons of God, okay. I've talked about this a lot. I've written about this a lot. And I wanted to just share with you, this is a section from my second edition. It's also in my first and third, but they may be slightly different, more or less material. It's from starting on page 113 in my second edition. This one right here. You can get this on Elihu Books or Amazon.com. Well, where was that? Yeah. Almost lost my place, huh? Right here. Start on page 113, this subtitle, The Sons of God. Okay. If you haven't read this section, or if you haven't read it in a while, or, if you're really not familiar with all the details that go into the discussion about how the angels are gods, right? We know the angels are called gods. They're called gods in Psalm 82, in John 10. They're called gods in Psalm 8, 5, and 6, identified as angels in Hebrews 2, 7, and 9. So they're called gods in terms of how they're made, right? Man is made a man comparatively to the angels as gods. So it's talking about their nature. It's talking about their divine nature, how they're spirits, like God. And so you have those explicit identifications, right? We know the Trinitarians, they can't handle it and they freak out and they come up with these terrible arguments to try to get around what the Bible teaches. But the Bible is very explicit, is it not? I mean, God and Jesus. And Jesus, in his own defense, as he's being accused of making himself theos, right? It's like the very subject that comes up all the time the Trinitarians want to argue with us about. It's already answered. The Son of God answered it. The Jews accused him of making himself God or a God. Has to be a God because he was calling himself the Son of God, and the sons of God are gods, as God and Jesus say in that account. Jesus quoting God, and that's how God says it, of course, right? So Jesus quoting it and saying it is him saying it. So what is the problem, right? Trinitarians, they just can't figure it out, right? They collapse. And they ignore the Melchizedek scroll, right? They ignore the context. Psalm 82, whole book of Psalms basically calls angels gods all throughout. It never calls human Israelite judges gods, right? So they're just ridiculous, and that would make no sense. Jesus using a text that calls human Israelite judges gods in his own defense, if the Jews were actually accusing him of what their translations say, right? making himself God, capital G-O-D. That's what they're saying the Jews are accusing him of. And he's responding to a text that calls humans gods. So, they just create these ridiculous situations when it's actually a brilliant response, is it not? He's one of the sons of God. That's what he means when he calls himself a god. He doesn't mean like polytheistic sense in like a rivalry with God. And he doesn't mean a person of God. He means one of the sons of God who are gods, like the Bible teaches. Not only, again, in those explicit texts like Psalm 8:5 or Psalm 82, John 10, but the very expression sons of God in the Hebrew language denotes they're divine. Now, humans can be called sons of God too. In a sense, it's different. But that's because contextually we are different. It's understood that we're different. But apart from that, right? No one's going to argue that it means that in our case, because it's more of an adoption or sons of God in the sense that we've been given life as humans. But when it's talking about spirits, or when it's talking about members of the same class, they're included, right? Then it's talking about, when it's talking about sons of this group or this type, in Hebrew, it means they are that type. I'm going to show you right here. Start on page 113. I point out how in ancient Hebrew, when we read sons of someone or some group of people, they're often seen as members of the group, like I just said. For example, 1 Kings 20:35, the sons of the prophets are prophets. In Nehemiah 12:28, the sons of the singers are singers. Concerning this use of son, Hebrew scholar Gesenius states, there is another use of ben, son, or bene, sons, to denote membership in a guild or society or of a tribe or any definite class. Thus, Benai Elohim, sons of God, and Benai Ha Elohim, sons of the God, Genesis 6:2-4, Job 1:6, 2:1, 38:7, properly means not sons of God or gods. Properly means not sons of God or gods, but beings of the class of Elohim, God or gods, exactly like we're taught by God and the Son of God, Psalm 82, John 10. Gerald Cook believes that, and I'm quoting there, Gesenius, right, from his Hebrew grammar right here. Here's the details in footnote 109. Then I quote Gerald Cook, who believes sons of God are without question, lesser divine beings. So again, we've talked about polytheism, monotheism, henotheism, how they're really none of them, or monolatry, right? None of them really fully capture what the Bible presents, sons of God theology. One God the Father, sons of God are gods. Some represent their Father as the one God, and others choose to become their own gods or follow others who become their own gods, like Satan. But there's no question there's other lesser divinities. Even Trinitarians accept Satan as that. How can you deny it, right? I mean, I talked about it before. Bible and the Trinity conflict videos. See parts probably 18 through 22. You'll find the discussion in there multiple times. And so it's no surprise after you read what Gesenius and Gerald Cook say. Gerald Cook's reference Sons of God article here that I referenced earlier as well. It's no surprise then to find texts like Job 1:6 translated. Job 1:6, like we read in our text reading. The day arrived when the gods come and present themselves before Yahweh, which is, of course, not God's name. That's not how you pronounce it. But we know that scholarship has a hard time catching up with facts sometimes, particularly as it relates to the divine name and things like the Trinity. But we'll save that, and we have, of course, discussed it before, but we'll discuss it again another time. Let's focus on this part. The Anchor Bible, that's what I'm quoting here, the Anchor Bible, Marvin Pope, Anchor Bible 15. Instead of translating it the day when the sons of God came and presented themselves before Jehovah, it just gets right to it, right? It just breaks down the idiom to what it means. The day arrived when the gods came and presented themselves before Jehovah, which is exactly what we have in Psalm 82, right? The council of the gods. Again, I don't know how Trinitarians can continuously fail to connect these really obvious dots, right? Tarantula Clan, thank you very much. Always appreciated. Oh, and George, good to see you. So you can see right here, right? We've got this idiom, sons of, being used of things like prophets, singers, to denote actual prophets and singers. And we have it used in reference to the sons of God who are spirits, not humans, like God, to also show they are the same. They're gods, just like we're told explicitly in Psalm 82 and John 10, and in Psalm 8:5, and elsewhere where Jehovah is described as the God of the gods. I did a whole video on it, the gods of Psalm 82. So now we have this idiom, and so Jesus claiming to be the Son of God or God's Son, do you see now why the Jews connected that with him making himself Theos, a God? And why Jesus then quoted the text where other sons of God are called gods? Because that's what he is, right? And him even more so, because those sons of God were being addressed. They were being rebuked by God, not him. But he's putting himself on the same parallel as the other sons of God, not human Israelite judges and not God. He chose the sons of God who are called gods as spirits like God. All right, and then in this note here, I quote the Kohler and Baumgartner lexicon, very well-known lexicon. On page 134, they define Benai Elohim as individual divine beings, gods. Let me make that bigger for everyone, right? If you want to get my digital version, $14.95, it's not that much. You can get it, you have all the stuff. Right there, right? So we have examples, same idiom, in other texts, sons of the prophets, sons of the singers. We've got translations like the Anchor Bible. We've got grammars like Gesenius, scholars like Gerald Cook, and lexicographers like Kohler and Baumgartner explicitly telling us, and all you Trinitarians, sons of God are gods. Like God and the Son of God explicitly told everyone thousands of years ago. So, that's why we say the same thing. We're just repeating what the Bible's telling us, right? It's what it teaches explicitly by reference, right? Little lower than gods. I said you are gods. And by idiom, by association with the group or type. Gods, individual divine beings, plural, Trinitarians, plural, gods. Jesus was accused of being a singular. He responded with what? Plural. So you cannot say we cannot use a plural because that's what the master did. And that's what you should do too. And then I go on to talk about the example of the Israelites, right? Remember I said sometimes it's a little different, right? We're not the same as spirits who are like God. The description sons of God is given to Israelites in one other text, At least I know it for sure. Hosea 1:10. Let's see. I think there might be. Well, we can deal with that text another time. Let's stick with sons of God. So Hosea 1:10. I was going to get into some of the Dead Sea Scroll variants, but we'll save that. So this description is much different than when used of angels because in Hosea it's figurative, relating to their newfound relationship with God, right? He didn't. So, for example, in Hosea 1:10, when the Israelites are called sons of God, God didn't really give birth to them as sons in the way that he did the spirits, right? The Israelites were born through the reproductive system since Adam. So when he calls them his sons, he's talking about, again, this figurative newfound sonship in a spiritual sense. He's not talking about their nature in that sense, that he's actually giving birth to them as sons and they're like him, gods. But that's what it is with the spirits that are like him. They're not referred to as sons of God in a figurative context in the sense of a newfound relationship. They're only referred to it in the direct sense in which they relate to God, as his sons, directly, explicitly, without any figurative context or idea of spirituality involved, like I was just talking about with Hosea 1:10, right? So we have to be aware of these things, right? Because look, the angels in Genesis, Job, Book of Psalms are not described as sons of God like in Hosea 1:10. They're sons of God who take their station before God in the heavens and witness the creation of the heavens and the earth. Job 38:7. They were there in the beginning, the same beginning as John 1:1 and Genesis 1:1. That God and the Word were. It says the sons of God shouted in applause when all these things were made. So they're totally different than the Israelites in Hosea 1:10, right? Again, that is a spiritual, newfound relationship between them and God, not a direct, literal relationship between God and his spirit sons who are in heaven with him and who were there when he created all things. In the context of Genesis 1:1, all physical things, like we've talked about in relation to John 1:3. Context, it's the key. All right. So I think that covers that information well. And then I go in, of course, to further discussion of Psalm 82. But I wanted to go over those texts with you all because I missed you. I wanted to have a little time so that we could enjoy some spiritual discussion, so that we could come together and talk about our God, Jehovah, the one God of the Bible, and his Son, the sent forth one, as we treat each other the way we want to be treated. We talk about these things that strengthen our faith in the books of the Bible like Job, and we discuss different ancient ways of expressing meaning like idioms such as sons of God, sons of the singers, sons of prophets, when in the right context, not in a context that's clearly figurative or talking about something not relating to the nature of God, but to his new relationship with you. We're talking about beings who are like God, gods, individual gods, gods like the Anchor Bible said, and like the Kohler and Baumgartner lexicon said, and like Gesenius said, and like is true by example as we have shown, and where it's not true by context as we've also shown, Hosea 1:10. So all of this fits together and makes sense in the context in which it was written. We don't need to go hundreds of years after these texts to try to get a better understanding. It's all right here. And it's been here the whole time. So I'm glad you've taken your time to share your thoughts with me in the chat. We'll be back together soon. I may do a weekday upload or even live stream, but I should be back on a pretty regular schedule now. We'll be doing text readings. We'll get to Psalms next. I've got more Bible in the Trinity and Conflict. I've got more pre-Christian evidence Jesus is the biblical Messiah. And as long as I have breath, I will share it with you and praise our God together in Jesus' name.